All right, and we're ready to wrap up our talk about how to do an interview with B roll. All right, so once you've gone through and put together a narrative that makes sense to you, you've covered cuts with B roll. There's a couple other things you can do to finesse. Not everyone likes cross dissolves, but I kind of like them. They have a certain, when you're showing B roll, especially, oh, that's a dip to white. Um, they can just be kind of a softer, gentler. Looks like we didn't use cross dissolves in this. It's a more news like to just do the cross cuts, cut, with no cross dissolve. But maybe when you're going from one scene to another, you want to use some kind of transition. Looks like I said, we didn't use cross dissolve. We use a dip to white when we went from jump from one quote to another without B-roll to cover it. You know, it's sometimes those cross dissolves look weird because it's the same framing and it's obviously from the same interview. So you want to maybe make sure that maybe one is a little bit. Sometimes I bring them closer in post. See how this one is framed just a little different than that one. She's a little bit closer. Maybe you can't tell. Anyway, so it just kind of helps the brain make sense of like we're moving from one idea to the next, and the transition is the cue for that. When we have audio that goes from the end of one clip, and then there's a little space, and then the beginning of another clip, um, you'll see down here that there's an audio constant gain. So I find these, if I go to my effects, in the audio effects, don't need the obsolete ones. It's, sorry, audio transitions. We need the constant power or the constant gain. Um, you can, there's always a default setting. If I take this off and I put my cursor over the audio part of the clip, and it creates this little arrow, the little red arrow. If I right click and hit apply default transition, oh, look how long that is. I'm gonna, because this is, I don't necessarily want to fade this waveform here. I'm gonna put it over the transition until it creates that little, you see the cross dissolve symbol and the red arrow. It kind of magnetizes to it, and I'm gonna pull it all the way, maybe to here. When you can tell that she might have just like taken a breath or something. And that is going to just smooth out the end of that clip. It won't be an abrupt cutoff. It'll, dip down. It'll dip down into the quiet zone. And then we'll pick it up here again. Sometimes I'll do the same thing here, only on this end. I'll pull it this way. And Paul showed me, he pulls them really, really close. Just depends when you're listening back, like how does it need it. But even just that can take away that like breath sound, or any indication to the listener that there's a cut there. We're trying to kind of hide that. All right. Anyway, so I'm going to make all my little changes, and I'll end up with a fairly close to the final version, but I'm still going to call it a rough cut. That's because I need to show it to somebody else and make sure that everything I've done makes sense. I haven't left anything out. I don't have any misspellings. What else? Sometimes people don't like the music. You want someone to look it over who's more objective. So I'm gonna either have them watch it while it's in the editor, or I'm gonna export a version and then have them watch it privately through a private link on either YouTube or some kind of sharing site. Just to review how to export stuff, I'm going to come to my project, and to find the sequence that I want to export, Designer Challenge 2015, File, Export, Media. You'll do this for every project, so it's good to get in the habit. This is the format I want you guys using, H.264, at least for class. And we're going to bring this to a medium bit rate. Everything else should be output name. Let's see where it's going. So when I hover over this, it's going to tell me it's going to go to the PR drive, finished project, design challenge, compile. That's where all the other assets are. If this is not where I want it, I can browse just by clicking it and picking a different place to save that. But I think we're okay with that. All right, and then I'm just going to hit export. And it's going to take a bit and send it as a finished sequence, as a finished MP4 to my folder where I want it. And so this is like a 3-minute deal at this size. It's going to take a couple minutes to export. But then when I go and look in that folder, I'm going to be able to find it. There's nothing worse than working really hard on a project, and I have seen students do this all the time. They export it and then they don't know where it goes, or all their files are saved willy-nilly. It's a mess, and they're stressed out trying to get everything together at the last minute. So like, start organized, stay organized, export it into, think about where you're sending it. It's just like putting it on a desk that's messy versus putting it nicely in a folder where you can find it and access it again. I'm not going to make you watch this. I'm going to put this up, and then I'll send you I'll include the link to the finished project just so you can kind of see how it sounds. Okay? Thanks, guys.